Story 1. The elevator that kept stopping on the wrong floor, even when locked. This happened to me in 2018, when I was working night maintenance at a private medical research center in Maryland. The building wasn't huge, 6 floors, 2 of which were restricted access labs, but it had a strangely clinical silence at night. Unlike most buildings, which buzz or hum faintly, this one felt acoustically empty, like the walls were absorbing sound. You notice things like that when you work alone between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. My job was mostly routine. I'd check mechanical rooms, reset breakers if needed, replace ceiling panels, run system diagnostics. And a big part of it was just walking. Floor to floor, up and down. The center had 2 elevators, but only one ran overnight with a keycard override to access certain floors. Floors 5 and 6 were off limits to most people. I didn't have access either. Only IT, senior researchers, and the director had that clearance. By week 3, I'd gotten used to the layout, the chilled stillness, the slow, metallic echo of my boots in the hallways. It was a peaceful kind of isolation, until the elevator started hesitating. At first, I didn't think anything of it. The elevator was old, 90s era, but regularly inspected. Still, I noticed that every time I rode from floor 1 to 4, the elevator would briefly stop at 5. Just a moment. The doors wouldn't open, the lights wouldn't flicker, it would slow, click, and keep going. That's normal, I told myself. Maybe someone upstairs pressed the call button, but I checked the log. The building's elevators kept digital reports. Every stop, every call, every door open. I looked over the report from my shift. No request had been made from floor 5, not once, and stranger still, there was no weight fluctuation either, no one waiting, no one boarding. The system logged it as a pass-through, but the hesitation, that's what got to me. It wasn't like a technical pause, it felt intentional, the way the elevator slowed, gradually, as if deciding, then hovered in place for just long enough that you could almost sense it waiting, like it was listening. By the 5th night, it wasn't just occasional anymore. Every time I rode the elevator after midnight, it stopped at 5, even with no calls. Even when I used the override to go directly from floor 1 to 4, it always paused, same duration, same silence. I began avoiding it, taking the stairs instead, but sometimes I'd need to move heavy equipment. I'd reluctantly call the elevator and try not to look at the panel as it dimmed at floor 5. One night I brought it up to security. "You're not the first to say that," one of the guards told me, "but there's nothing in the logs. No fault, no override. It's just weird. Weird." That's all he said. A few days later, I was pulling a toolbox back up to the 4th floor after fixing a sensor on B2. I was tired and distracted. I tapped my badge, scanned the override, hit 4. The elevator started to move. Then, again, the hesitation. Floor 5, but this time the doors opened. That shouldn't have happened. There was no call from inside. No button for 5 had been pressed. I double-checked the panel. I hadn't touched it. And the worst part, the hallway was pitch black. No motion light, no exit sign glow, just a black void beyond the open doors. I stood there paralyzed, my hand gripping the handle of the cart. The doors stayed open longer than usual. 4 seconds, 5, 7. I could feel the hairs on my arms rising. Then a soft beep, and the doors closed again, silently, slowly. I made it to 4. I backed out, turned off the elevator power from the mechanical room, and logged a manual maintenance shutdown. That was the last time I rode alone. After that, I started using the service stairs exclusively, even if it meant extra time. But the weirdest detail? I checked the security camera footage later, the cameras inside the elevator. At 2:17 a.m. that night, I watched myself stand inside the cab, pulling the toolbox behind me. I watched the doors open on floor 5, and for just one frame, one single second, the lights inside the elevator flickered, and it looked like someone was standing just behind me. After that night, I avoided the elevator for nearly a week. I logged phantom stops as routine malfunctions and reported them to facilities, but no one investigated deeply. It wasn't until my supervisor went on vacation and a replacement insisted I resume standard elevator use that I reluctantly went back. I started doing a small thing, just out of nervous habit. Every time I rode up alone, I'd glance at the mirrored panel inside the elevator. It covered the back wall, meant to make the cab look bigger, but mostly it just reflected you back at yourself, slightly distorted due to the old beveled glass. I started noticing something strange. The elevator had a delay when the doors closed. About 3 seconds, just enough time for the motion sensor to finalize, the lock mechanism to click in place. That's when I'd see it, in the mirror. It never happened with the doors open. Never as I entered. Only in that moment when the doors slid shut and the space became sealed, it would flash, a blurred figure, tall, unidentifiable behind me, not directly visible, not even clearly defined, but there. I watched the footage. Security feeds backed it up, or tried to. In the frames recorded just before the doors sealed, there was a brief distortion, a flicker across the rear panel, a shape taller than me, obscured by the reflection. It wasn't a camera glitch. I brought it to the IT guy, hoping for some rational explanation. He blinked at the screen for a while and said, "Must be compression artifacts." But he didn't look convinced, not really. I started experimenting. I tried facing the mirror when the doors shut, turning around quickly, holding my phone up to record the reflection in real time. Nothing, but on the footage, always the same. A blur, a flicker, one frame of something standing behind me, not during open doors, only the instant they closed. I even tried standing completely still, phone raised, recording behind me, but in person, there was never anything there. Until one night. I was riding to floor 3, back from a circuit panel repair. It was around 2:40 a.m. The elevator began its usual routine. I held my phone at chest height, recording, watching the mirror. The doors began to close, and this time I didn't see a blur. I saw my reflection, clear, still, and behind it, a man. No face, no motion, just standing. But when I turned, there was no one. The video glitched, it skipped. 1 second I was alone, the next I wasn't. My body language shifted in the video, like I felt something, but nothing visible remained. I stayed late that night, rewinding the footage again and again, until I noticed a detail I hadn't caught before. Every time the figure appeared, even briefly, my posture changed. My head turned slightly, my shoulders tensed. Some part of me knew. And the worst part? The figure always stood in the same place, just inches behind me, in the reflection, never in real time. I started researching. There's a term, unofficial, anecdotal, that popped up in some old maintenance forums. Dead floor syndrome, a condition where elevators stop at certain floors not recorded in call logs. Floors with no registered traffic, no weight fluctuations, no valid access. It's usually dismissed as sensor issues or miscalibrated software. But some of the stories go deeper. In older hospitals and industrial buildings, certain elevators would consistently stop at disused or locked levels, often at the same time each night. And sometimes, during those stops, strange things were reported. Drafts, smoke, sounds of movement, but never people. It got under my skin. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The logs, the footage, that reflection, and more than anything, the way the elevator always paused at floor 5. One night I decided to test it. I stayed late, past my shift. Around 3:15 a.m., I positioned myself inside the elevator and tapped my badge for floor 4. Just as the cab began to move, I reached out and held the emergency stop. The cab froze. I waited. 2 minutes. 3. Then manually I overrode the stop and selected floor 5. The panel didn't react, my card didn't have access, but the elevator began to move anyway. No sound, just motion. Then it stopped. Floor 5. The doors opened. There was smoke, thin, like burned paper, not from fire but something old. There were no alarms, no sprinklers, just the elevator doors open to darkness. A smell, metallic, faint, like a hospital corridor left too long without cleaning. And then the intercom buzzed, a low tone followed by static. Then a voice, faint, raspy. "You forgot someone." That was all. I didn't move, didn't speak. I hit the door closed repeatedly until the panel beeped and the cab descended. When I checked the logs the next day, something new was there. An access request from my badge to floor 5. Time-stamped at 3:17 a.m., but I never had clearance. I checked with IT. They said that floor 5 had been locked down since 2014 after a lab accident involving chemical exposure. The floor had been scrubbed, sealed, and scheduled for conversion. But the project was abandoned. No one used it. The power grid had even been rerouted. So how did I get there? I still don't know. The elevator was removed from service a month later after a different staff member reportedly passed out during a stop between floors. When they reviewed his logs, and mine, they noticed something even stranger. Between floors 4 and 5, over the course of several nights, the cab had paused, not at a floor, but in between, as if it was stopping at a place that wasn't there anymore. The building was remodeled a year later, the old elevator shaft sealed off, and me, I left the job. But sometimes, around 3:17 a.m., I still dream of the intercom buzzing and that voice. "You forgot someone." Story 2. The motion detector turned on, but no one ever walked by. This happened to me in 2021. I was working overnight security for a large freight logistics warehouse outside Phoenix. The company leased storage space to multiple distributors, everything from auto parts to medical equipment. The facility was massive, 300,000 square feet, long rows of shelving cages, stacked crates, forklift lanes, the kind of place that never truly felt full, just cold and echoing. My shift started at 8 p.m. and ended at 6 a.m. I worked alone most nights. There was a day shift team, of course, supervisors, logistics coordinators, forklift drivers, but after hours, it was just me. I had access to all cameras, lighting, and perimeter controls from a locked booth above the south side of the warehouse floor. Think of it like a tall glass cube with a 270-degree view of the building raised on steel struts. Quiet, secluded. Most of my job was passive, monitoring motion-activated lights and internal cameras for any signs of breach or animal intrusion. The system was thermal sensitive and highly accurate. Each lane had infrared grids that would trigger soft white floodlights if anything moved through, person, rodent, even airborne particles, if the system was dialed up high enough. I rarely had to do much. It was peaceful, even boring. That is, until the pattern started. At first, I thought it was a malfunction. Around 2:12 a.m., one Tuesday night, a single motion light clicked on in lane 34. That wasn't unusual. Sometimes mice or birds triggered them. I tapped into the camera feed. Nothing. The light turned off after 60 seconds, but then it happened again. Same lane 3 minutes later, then again. 4 times that night, always about 3 minutes apart. No movement ever caught on video, no heat trails, nothing. The next night, it was lane 33. Same pattern, single light activation, then darkness. I logged it as a sensor calibration issue and made a note for maintenance. They checked it the following day. All systems were normal, no faults detected. Grid alignment perfect. Then it continued. Lane 32, then 31, one night at a time, always around 2 a.m., always a single light, nothing in the feed, no thermal signature. I began paying closer attention. I'd sit still, eyes on the monitors, watching the motion zones. It didn't feel random. The movement, if you could call it that, had followed a path. It moved laterally, smoothly, one lane each night. But the lights activated without weight. No audible footsteps, no shadows, just a soft glow and silence. I tried standing in the booth, staring out at the warehouse floor. I could see the lights blink on, distant and pale, but I never saw a shape, not even a blur. It reminded me of something I'd read once, about perceptual interference fields, hypothetical zones where the human brain can't register physical presence the way it normally does, where something might be there, even moving, but our senses won't acknowledge it unless it crosses a very specific threshold. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I started to wonder, because by the second week, the pattern had reached lane 26. I ran diagnostics on the sensor grid myself. The data disturbed me. Each activation was precisely 3 minutes and 17 seconds apart. Each activation lasted exactly 61 seconds. Each one registered, kinetic fluctuation detected, no mass recorded. I don't know how that's possible, but that's what it said. I reported it to management. They shrugged it off. Probably a data loop, they said. Reboot the system. So I did. Nothing changed, except now the lights didn't just flick on. They flickered, just a little, like something was hesitating at the edge of each grid, dipping in and out. And the most unnerving part, I started hearing something, only faintly, a soft shift of air, like displaced current. A brushing, as if something passed near the booth glass without touching it. Nothing I could describe, nothing I could prove. But there's a kind of fear that doesn't come from sound or sight. It comes from absence, from the knowing that something is there, and you can't make it show itself. The booth sat near lane 18. After 10 nights of the light pattern, I realized it was heading toward me. 1 lane per night. Lane 25. Then 24, then 23. Each night, the light would click on at 2:17 a.m. The duration was exact. The movement, if it existed, invisible. I began documenting every instance in a spreadsheet. Not just light activations, but temperature drops, noise anomalies, and camera glitches. By lane 21, things changed. The motion lights didn't just activate in isolation anymore. Now they activated in pairs, one lane, then the next, like someone moving steadily forward, pausing, click, pause, click. It felt deliberate. On night 14, I watched the monitors with a dull ache in my chest. Lane 20 lit up, then 19. The booth was next. I thought about locking the door, but it was always locked. I thought about turning on the full overhead floods, but something stopped me, as if more light would only reveal more I didn't want to see. At 2:17, lane 18 blinked on. I stared at the feed. Nothing, no shape, no motion, just white light falling over a section of concrete, crates to the side, faint mist from the building's air system. Then, silence. I waited for lane 17, but it never came. The light in lane 18 stayed on longer this time, 83 seconds, then faded, and I heard it. Not through the speakers, through the wall, breathing, low, measured, ragged, but not mine. I froze. My breath held tight in my throat. It was coming from the hallway behind the booth, a narrow walkway used for electrical access. No one should have been there. The motion sensors didn't cover that path. I stared at the booth door. It had a small rectangular window, just glass, dark beyond. The breathing continued for another 12 seconds. Then it stopped. I waited. I didn't move. Eventually, I stepped out of the booth and scanned the access corridor with my flashlight. Nothing. But when I looked down at the cement floor, there was a single smear of condensation, the kind left behind by a cold object in a warm environment, roughly the shape of a shoulder. I returned to the booth, rewound the camera feed. There was nothing behind the glass, just the sound. That night, I didn't sleep when I got home. I kept thinking about the sensors. They could detect movement through pressure or heat, but this pattern wasn't using either. It was triggering them through presence. And now it knew where I was. I spent the next few days combing through internal archives, trying to find any incident reports from the warehouse's previous contractors. Nothing directly relevant. but I did find an old PDF from 2014, a facilities memo from the site's original owners. Before it became a logistics hub, the structure had been used by a federal agency to store large-scale biometric equipment, prototype scanning machines, sealed data cores, climate-modified testing environments. They called it intermittent mimicry events. The document outlined 5 instances where nightly sensor activations occurred without visual confirmation. Each one followed the same behavior: 1 point of activation per night with a shift in directionality towards sensitive control centers. The term they used was adaptive residual displacement, meaning something was learning from the routines, copying behavior, moving in patterns similar to human patrols. But the strangest part? One entry noted a change in light activation patterns whenever the guard altered his route, as if the entity, if it could be called that, had grown used to his timing, his rhythm, and when he changed it, so did the activations. I ran a test. I changed my routine. Instead of logging into the booth at 10 p.m., I delayed it until midnight. I began walking the warehouse floor in reverse, beginning at lane 1 and working backward. Randomized the path. For the next 2 nights, the lights didn't activate. Then they returned. Only now, they triggered simultaneously, in random lanes, 7 and 21, then 4 and 19, always in symmetrical opposition. As if trying to box in where I was. I didn't tell anyone. I just started keeping notes, timestamps, diagrams, and then the final incident happened. It was 3:06 a.m. I had just returned from the East Wing restroom. The booth was locked, and I could see the monitors from the window. No lights active. Then I noticed it. The motion light inside the restroom flicked on. That shouldn't have been possible. It was a private room. No external door. I had just come from it. I had not left anything behind. I stared at the feed. Soft white light filled the room. Empty. Still. But in the mirror, over the sink, just for a single frame, something moved. Not a face. Not a shape. A distortion. Like heat over asphalt. The light stayed on longer than it should have. I waited for it to turn off. It didn't. I checked the system logs the next morning. It didn't record any motion, no heat signature. But the light had been triggered by manual override, which should have been impossible. The override panel was inside the room. I submitted my resignation that same week. I left the final note on the back of my logbook. Whatever's walking that floor, it's not trying to be seen, it's trying to be learned. And then, on my final night, just before 3 a.m., every light in the warehouse blinked on at once, just for a second, and then went black. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. Story 3. She was in every frame of footage, but never there in person. This happened in 2022. At the time, I worked overnight security at a private history museum outside Denver, the kind funded by grants and endowments, quiet and rarely visited outside of field trips or weekend enthusiasts. The building was old, brick and limestone, retrofitted over the bones of a 1930s courthouse. It had 3 floors, mostly galleries, along with a climate-controlled archive room in the basement and a rotating exhibit space on the top level. I was the only staff on site after 8 p.m. The museum had 87 cameras, low lux, infrared, some motion-triggered, some continuously recording. The feeds were patched through a software suite that rendered time-stamped tiles in a 12-camera grid across 3 screens in the security room. I didn't have to monitor them actively unless an alarm triggered, but I usually kept one eye on the screens as I read or walked the gallery paths. The first time I noticed her, I was reviewing footage after a false alarm. A vibration sensor in the WWI exhibit had gone off at 3:11 a.m. The display case hadn't been opened. The vibration registered as ambient tremor, but protocol meant I had to check for tampering. I pulled the hallway footage from just before the alarm. What I saw didn't make sense. At 3:05 a.m. the hall was empty, no motion, no sound, but in the frame from 3:06:02, 1 second after the motion light engaged, there she was, a woman, not moving, just standing, her back to the camera, pale dress, shoulder-length black hair, barefoot, facing the case. But I hadn't seen her in real time. I hadn't triggered an alert. The sensor caught tremor, but no heat signature. And most importantly, I was walking that hall at 3:07. I didn't see anyone. I rewound the footage. There she was again, earlier this time, 3:02, then 3:0. I kept going backward. At 2:55, the hallway was empty. At 2:50, she was there again. Same posture, same angle, like she was inserted, stitched into moments before I watched them. I didn't know what I was looking at. The footage was continuous. There were no breaks. But somehow, she kept appearing earlier, the further back I looked. Eventually, I checked 1:30 a.m. There she was, standing at the same spot. No variation. By midnight, she wasn't in the footage anymore. So whatever was happening, and it began after midnight and was retroactively rewriting the visual record, chronological distortion. I downloaded several clips and cross-referenced them against the backup logs. The timestamps matched, the file sizes matched, the metadata was untouched. But she wasn't ever there. Not in the live feed, not during my patrols. Never in real time, only in playback. Always ahead of the moment I pressed play. Always earlier, always present before presence should be possible. The next night I tried a test. I marked a piece of tape on the hallway floor where she usually appeared and placed a small paper cone on it. Then I let the feed run, watching in real time. Nothing disturbed it, but when I reviewed the footage after, the cone was knocked over. Before I had placed it, it fell at 2:41 a.m. I hadn't even been in the room until 2:50. I tried again, different objects, a small mirror, a key ring. Every time, the moment I reviewed the footage, something was different. Something had already happened. I began to understand. This wasn't surveillance. It was memory. And I wasn't watching events unfold. I was watching them be remembered. Incorrectly. Or maybe just from a different perspective of time. After 2 weeks of these occurrences, I started pulling audio samples. Most of the cameras didn't have live audio, but the central gallery ones did. That included the hallway where she always appeared. I scrubbed the WAV file from the same clip, the 3:06 appearance. I boosted the gain, applied a denoiser, and there it was, a hum, very low, around 17 hertz. It started exactly 1 second before she appeared in the frame, and faded out 2 seconds after she vanished. I thought it was an equipment artifact, old wiring, power interference, but then I overlaid the hum from different clips, different nights, different timestamps. They matched. Same frequency, same rise and fall, identical shape. I ran it through a spectral analyzer. The waveform was strange, harmonic, almost musical. It resembled something I'd once heard in a documentary, the subsonic tones of marine mammals, whale communication, low, sustained pulses used to communicate across long distances, except this didn't seem meant to travel. It felt intimate, close range, directed. I isolated the frequency, played it back at 5x speed. And for a moment I thought I heard something, not language, not melody, more like grief, if that makes sense. The way it trembled, like a breath held too long, like someone trying not to cry. It made me dizzy, my vision blurred. I turned it off. After that, I began to notice something else. Whenever she appeared, the hum would spike slightly, but only when I watched. If I left the clip running in the background, there was no spike. But if I focused, even silently, the waveform shifted. Just a fraction, like it was responding, like it knew. And then, one night, I tried recording myself while reviewing. I used a separate device, not on the system network. At 3:19 a.m., she appeared in the north stairwell camera, Not her usual hallway. The hum began, but this time, as it peaked, something changed in the room I was sitting in. The temperature dropped. I could see my breath. I checked the feed, and she wasn't on the screen anymore. I looked back at the recorded audio. It had picked up something else. A whisper, just under the hum. 2 syllables. My name. The museum had a closed archive below ground, climate-controlled, low-light, high-humidity regulation. I rarely went down there unless there was a fire alarm test. But the archivist, Helen, once told me something that stayed with me. She said certain rooms remembered things, especially when they contained objects that had absorbed human attention. Old weapons, ritual garments, unmarked photographs. She called it archival imprinting, not in any official capacity, but as a sort of poetic theory. I asked what she meant. She said, "Some things are too watched. They can't help but reflect." That's where I found the oldest footage. The sub-basement had 3 cameras, motion-triggered only. They stored 30 days of data before wiping. I decided to look through them. The woman was there too, but not standing. In the footage, she moved, slowly. Not walking, more like gliding, as if pulled by something. Her hands always hovered near the stacks labeled Anthropological Recovery, Unattributed. That's where we stored items from unverified excavation sites, mass graves, famine settlements, conflict zones, the kind of items no one ever claimed. I watched one clip on loop for almost an hour. She circled the room 3 times. Each loop, she paused behind the same column, and on the 4th loop, she wasn't in the footage anymore. I was, standing where she had stood, but I had never gone down there. Not that night. I played the next clip. She was behind me, watching, but I never turned. Then the next. I turned, but no one was there, and when I rewound the footage, I wasn't in it anymore. Only her, hands folded, staring into the camera as if waiting. I ran upstairs, checked the live feed of the archive. Nothing. I pinged the sensor logs. No entry registered. But one of the fire suppression hatches was open, the kind that only opens manually. There's no reason it should have been. I walked to the stairwell. The door was closed, locked. But as I stood there, I heard the hum again, not from a speaker, from behind the door, soft, low, familiar. Almost like it was waiting for me to acknowledge it. I didn't open the door. I went back to the desk. I logged out. My resignation email was short. Some footage should never be watched. It watches back. To this day, I still think about that last clip. The timestamp was wrong. It was dated 3 weeks into the future, but it was me, sitting at the desk, staring at the monitor. Behind me, the woman, her hand resting on my shoulder, and I wasn't moving.